Hey there! Thanks for listening to the INFEMIT podcast, where we want to challenge the people of God to see the realities of their context and reflect on and reformulate concepts such as mission, missionary, mission field, holistic mission, and more.
Hi everyone, my name is Esteban Amestegui, and I am the Communications Intern in INFEMIT. Today, we have the privilege to talk with Las Newman, the Global Associate Director for Regions for the Lausanne Movement. He lives in Kingston, Jamaica, and is a former president of the Caribbean Graduate School of Theology. He is also a member of the INFEMIT Networking Team and the INFEMIT Board. Las, thank you for being here with us. For the people who are new to INFEMIT, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to share with you and with the INFEMIT family and with others. My name is Las Newman, and I am from the country of Jamaica in the Caribbean, and where I currently live and served in the student ministry in the Caribbean for over 30 years before I left that world and went into the world of theological education. So I became the president of the Caribbean Graduate School of Theology, and I served in that post for 7 years. And then when I retired from that post, I was invited to become the Associate Global Director for Regions for the Lausanne Movement, post in which I currently serve. So my responsibility is to coordinate a team of regional directors in the 12 global regions of the Lausanne world. And during all this very long career, I have been associated with INFEMIT from the 1980s to the 90s and to the current time. I serve on the INFEMIT Board and on the INFEMIT Networking Team.
And can you share with us how COVID-19 has specifically affected your life and your context?
Well, we are all sort of caught up in the midst of this global pandemic, which is really the third pandemic of the 21st century, but the one that seems to have had the most extensive impact on almost every country. 3 billion people across the world on every continent have experienced lockdowns in one way or another. And in the context where I live here in Jamaica, we're currently on the lockdown. We are actually experiencing a second wave of this pandemic. It was in March of this year, 2020, that the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 as a global pandemic. And since then, it has just spread around the world to the point where all of us are affected in one way or another. I think personally, COVID has impacted my work because my work entailed traveling to meet with my teams all across the world. But of course, one of the impacts of COVID is that borders are closed, travel has been suspended, and although some countries are slowly trying to reopen their borders and reopen their economies and allow some form of travel, but still, it has had a major disruptive effect on our ministry. So we've resorted, as all of us have had to do, to operating in a virtual space. So I communicate with my teams around the world virtually, and we try to continue our ministry and our mission through virtual platforms. So it's great to be able to talk about it now in a reflective way, but also to try to look ahead and see what might be as we go forward with the mission that we have of spreading the gospel around the world.
How do you think COVID-19 impacts our understanding of mission and theology?
Well, we have to look at the level of impact that the COVID has had on society, which includes the church and communities and so on. COVID has impacted, first of all, our health. It's a public health pandemic. And there are some alarming statistics that are available. You know, today, at the end of August 2020, there are almost 500,000 people dead because of this pandemic. The first two pandemics of the 21st century, the death rate was comparatively small. The first was, of course, the SARS pandemic in 2002, which lasted around 2 years, 2002 to 2004. There were under 1,000 deaths as a result of SARS. And then came the Ebola outbreak in 2013 to 2016. And that left about 11,000 people dead. Now here we are in 2020 with this pandemic of COVID-19, and there are, to date, after 10 months, 500,000 people dead. And there are 25 million people affected with confirmed cases of this pandemic around the world. So public health has been affected. And here in the Caribbean and here in Jamaica, there are many health issues that people are faced with, what we call underlying conditions. So our elderly and even our young people are suffering from heart disease and various forms of mental health issues and so on. And then this pandemic of COVID-19, which is a respiratory disease affecting your breathing system, has just caused severe restrictions on people's movement and people's activities. So governments have responded by imposing lockdowns in communities, lockdowns on businesses, lockdowns on our normal activities, on education, schools and colleges and universities and so on. So, our work has been severely, and our life severely disrupted in health, in education, in the global supply chains, in our food security, in many different ways. Now, how does this affect mission? Well, I think mission has not escaped. Christian mission has not escaped, and it has affected the way we are now approaching and thinking about doing mission in this age of pandemic. One of the ways in which this has impacted our missiological thinking in this part of the 21st century is a shift in the old paradigm of mission from the 19th to the 20th century, where mission was basically conceived in terms of cross-cultural mission, a cross-cultural exercise, going somewhere, traveling overseas. Of course, mission comes from the word missio, which means to send, and we are sent on a mission, and we have to travel from place to place. But one of the impacts of COVID is that we can't travel from place to place. You can't travel very far, at least for the time being. And so we have to realize that, as was in the early church, mission, it begins right in Jerusalem, right here at home. And so it has shifted our focus to rethink the paradigm of mission and to begin to look around, look at the impact of the pandemic on the poor, on the vulnerable, upon the lonely in lockdown, upon the least in the societies, those who are on the margins and the edges, and the despairing, the hopeless, and of course the bereaved, because as I mentioned, roughly 500,000 people have died from this illness. It's a serious situation where this 500,000 I refer to is basically in our region, in the Americas. Overall, it's around 850,000 people have died across the world. So it's having far-reaching effect on our way of thinking about how to do mission, what mission is, how it's conducted, who do we focus on, and how do we reach out? What messages do we bring, and so on. Let me point out one other area where I think the COVID-19 has impacted mission and theology. The pandemic has focused 21st century mission into a technology-driven missiology in this digital age. The coincidence of the spread of this pandemic, COVID-19, the coincidence of that occurred right at the outset of what is called the fourth industrial revolution, the revolution in this digital age, where there's far more data available and far more communication platforms that are available. And we know more, we see more, we reach more. I think missiologists, church leaders, mission agencies are now beginning to adapt their communication strategies using the communications technology from this digital age that is upon us. And it is one of those things that we note, the fact, the coincidence of the outbreak of this pandemic, which has restricted our global movements and restricted many things and impacted, in fact, the economies, the amount of money that's available. There's a global economic impact that this COVID-19 has brought, where there's a lot of significant industries, even temporarily, but with great effect. For example, here in the Caribbean, the major industry for us is tourism. We depend on tourism, whether it's land-based tourism, people come and visit our countries and stay in hotels and so on, or the cruise ship tourism industry. All those things have been suspended. And technically speaking, the economic impact and the fallout on the people who depend on tourism industry for their livelihoods, they have been severely, severely impacted. So this has had far-reaching effects on our society, but also on individuals personally, and on the way our governments respond to this crisis that's upon us, and the way our mission agencies and mission leaders also respond.
And in the light of this, do you have one or two recommendations for listeners?
Indeed. I think the major impact of the COVID-19 is on the disruption that it has brought to our lives. I think COVID-19 has also shifted missiological thinking. In what I find is that people are less concerned in mission environments and theological environments about causation. People are asking less questions about what caused the virus. Initially, there was this concern, what caused it. People are now more interested in hope finding. How do we find hope in the midst of the hopelessness and the despair and the anxiety and the fear and the worry? So the recommendation that I would have is that one is that we stay close to our home base. We begin to look at new areas for mission, and in terms of mission in Jerusalem, here at home where we are. Secondly, that we don't contribute to community spread. There are some Christian communities, some church environments that have become part of the group of people who are in denial about the reality of the impact of this pandemic, and who have a theology, well, God will provide, God will protect, and therefore we continue to gather in large numbers, and we operate in a way that suggests that it's business as usual. This is not business as usual. This is a time where when we see this happening and there is a community spread of the virus, then people begin to panic. As we see even some pastors being among the fatalities, church members being among the fatalities, people who get affected by this and who lose their lives. There's a lot of bereavement all around. And so we should not contribute to the community spread of the virus. And we should try to avoid, in these times, these mass gatherings and these mass meetings. But I think also we shouldn't give in to despair. We should, of course, be people of prayer and people of hope, and to recognize that God is indeed our shelter and our shield. And as the psalmist says in Psalm 91, whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. God is our refuge and our strength. And we have these comforting and consoling words from Scripture. And so we have a basis for hope in this world. We shouldn't despair. But the last recommendation I would give is that we should not be resistant to the benefits of this new industrial age, the digital age. We shouldn't be fighting the digital age with any countercultural attempts to avoid or to abuse or otherwise disregard the various platforms. We should master the technology. We should use the technology as instruments, as tools that God has given us for a time like this, whereby we can communicate, we can share hope, and so on. One of the things that COVID-19 has demonstrated is that the digital church is real. The church online is real. People have had to adjust to the online church, and that has allowed us to communicate far and wide. We reach far more people in our diasporas, people from our home countries who are living elsewhere, who can connect with our home church through these digital means. And it's an opportunity to renew, to reconnect, and to strengthen the ministry that God has given us. So we shouldn't fight it. We shouldn't resist it. But we should work with it. We should master it. We should use it as a tool to spread the gospel, to further our ministry, to deepen our relationships with one another, even as we are restrained from doing so, in person and physically, at least for the time being. Who knows how long this pandemic will last? Pandemics generally last 2 to 3 years, and so we have to learn how to live in these times. And one of the ways we do so is in terms of living within the realities and within the constraints that God has given us. Let me just close with a thought. In the early church, we know that one of the realities from Pentecost onwards was a persecution which affected the early church. The church was under pressure. They were under severe difficulties and constraints. And so they couldn't meet and identify publicly. They couldn't gather openly. And so they met in homes, in people's homes. The house church movement was significant. We see Paul writing in Romans, and at the end of Romans in chapter 16, he's giving his greetings to a lot of people. And he greeted Aquila and Priscilla and the church that meets in their house. We saw in Acts chapter 20, when Paul called together the elders from Ephesus, and it's like he was giving his farewell address to them. And he said to them, how I've taught you publicly and from house to house. So one of the realities of our 21st century and this impact of COVID-19 is that the house church movement is growing again. And people are gathering where they can in houses, in small numbers, in small groups, and so on. That's a reality as it was in the first century. So we should use these means to strengthen the fellowship, to spread the ministry, and to see a whole new mission opportunity in this context. this is a time for hope, not optimism that is without foundation, but optimism based on who God is, the one whom we live and operate and have our being, but also the one in whom we are so dependent for our life and for the opportunity he provides for us to minister in his name.
Thank you, Les. I think that we were able to talk about many subjects, and we went also deep on those topics. And all of this we did in a very short amount of time. And I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
And thank you, and God bless you in the ministry. Thank you for the ministry that you have, and as you continue to serve the INFEMIT team.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the platform you prefer. If you think this could be helpful for someone you know, please share it with them. The best compliment we can receive is a referral to someone else. See you next time.